Hey everybody, welcome back to Amar City. Today I'll be continuing the expansion of the city in the suburban area which I started working on in the last episode. So in that sense it's going to be a bit of standard fare since we're really just getting more suburbs in. But I'll also be focusing on a large mosque in the center of it and some of the decal assets which have come out over the course of the past couple of weeks, which might add some extra detail and unique touches to the city without having to really get rid of that clean look. So without further ado, let's get into the time-lapse and let's get into me building the mosque right away, because I really figured that was the most important thing for me to do at this point. I've gotten quite a few comments about the lack of mosques in the city, which is actually really good because I needed that stuff, pretty honestly. There was an incredible lack of mosques in the city so far. I had plans to have at least 5 mosques in the city, but even that is a very small number considering the population of the city. So that's something I definitely might want to re-evaluate as well. But the fact that we need more mosques in here is pretty much for certain, given that this is supposedly in Bahrain. So I figured this would be the best place to get a new mosque in, and this is a somewhat recently posted asset. I'm not sure anymore how I found it, but it actually works really well. It does have the general Arab style to it in terms of architecture, and there is barely anything like that on the workshop. There is the Dubai assets, which I'll definitely talk a little bit more about at some point later in this video, but there is barely any assets that really fit the style of this city, and this building in particular I feel could work as a large mosque, especially as that sort of community center. That's the function that I kind of wanted the building to have. It's a bit similar to what I had in the neighborhood earlier on, where I built the first mosque of the city. There's that small sort of central area in that part of the city where there is a train station connected to some shopping streets, connected to a boulevard, as well as some of the basic services like the police station, and as well, of course, the mosque. So you kind of have that community center in the middle of one of the outskirts of the city. If you remember in one of the earliest episodes, might even have been episode 1, that I talked about the sort of multiple hub approach for the city, where there's one big city center or downtown if you will, but every part of the city has its own hubs for that community to do things that you might otherwise have to go to the downtown for. And this is sort of part of that approach. And I really felt that this was the best building to fit that in. Also because it fits perfectly at the end of that road, which is, again, kind of like the first mosque. It has the train station, it has some of the more important buildings around this suburb, the general shopping area as well. There's that waterfront with the look of the downtown. So it's really the most important street of this residential area here, if you will. So I figured this was the best place to have that mosque and also back it up a little bit by that awkward water, which is currently sitting empty at the end of the mosque, where we're gonna have a marina in due time, so that we also kind of fulfill that function. Now I guess, you know, this isn't all residential. The idea behind the entire city is that it's mixed use. But this is more or less the more suburban area. But I'll probably talk a little bit more about that later on as well. Because in the end, and this is something that I also wanted to mention, I know that a lot of these videos are very similar, and I'm really sorry about that. There isn't really too much that I can do about it. I've streamed some of it, and I've done some work off camera, but there is just so much work to get the body of the city in before I can move to more unique, interesting things like the airports or power plants, that there really is so much work that I have to make these episodes out of them. And there is a fair amount of episodes, and much like the episodes before this one, where I did the similar sort of outskirt areas of the city, I kind of just want to talk about city skylines in general. Maybe what I've been watching and the ideas that are behind the city. And, you know, especially because it's been 2 weeks since I uploaded the last episode, and since there's been all sorts of amazing stuff going on in the City Skylines community, I think there's lots of things to talk about, even in relation to the city which I'm building here. So in the meantime, before I go off on that trail, I'm just working on the general suburb areas over here. This is the only parts of the city, or of this area which I'm building in this episode, which is somewhat dense, since this is still somewhat close to the core of this neighborhood, but the rest will also be quite focused on making these row houses and more suburb-esque buildings, and getting some of the details in, like all of the paths, all of the decals and the foliage work. Now, what I really wanted to talk about is the latest episode of Yuttho's Estrella series, which is a series that you might know. It's been existing for longer than this one has, though the uploads are somewhat infrequent. I know some people like to joke about like there never being any episodes and the upload schedule being very, very rare, but there are some really amazing episodes in there, and it was actually one of the series that inspired me also to build a city not focused on detail or how good it looks in game per se, but more on the philosophy and ideas behind it. It's well, you definitely have to watch it if you're into that kind of stuff, but it's generally it's in the future, and it has all sorts of urban planning, but even beyond that, it has all sorts of futurology sort of aspects behind it, and it's a really interesting series to follow. And on this latest episode, he actually has Jeff Speck, who is, from what I remember, an urbanist, city planner who's actually had TED Talks before, which are really good as well. And he actually did an interview with him on that video. Now, I don't want to talk like about those exact topics. You should check out the video if you're interested in it. It's really good. But what I found most interesting is that it definitely quite relates to the city. What Jeff Speck talks about a lot is the idea of walkability and creating cities that are walkable, for many of the reasons that I guess I've already talked about a little bit in some of the earlier episodes, and I definitely recognize, myself kind of being in that filter bubble of of like City Lab podcasts, Strong Towns, 99% Invisible, maybe Reddit. Oops, that was my MP3 player. Maybe Reddit, urban planning, those kinds of places where like pro-pedestrian views and anti-car views run very rampant for very good reasons. But anyway, he talks about these ideas, and one thing that struck me most and that I found very interesting with me being Dutch and making this city was the idea of making streets walkable by making them more interesting. And this is super common sense in a way, and I am not sure how I completely forgot about this. But the idea is really that you want to have interesting buildings, changing environments to make it interesting for people to walk. You don't want to walk through a neighborhood where you're just walking past a huge parking garage, as he said, or just through a flat wall for an extended period of time. And I thought it was kind of an interesting way for me to relate to the issue of making some of the more suburb areas in Amar City more walkable. And what it especially made me think of was the Dutch suburb that I live in myself. And when you hear the word suburb, you might already start cringing and be like, no, that's not walkable, no way. But I feel for the place that I live, which is quite definitely a suburb, it's actually a very walkable place. I don't even have a driver's license, and I walk quite a bit around the area, and I know that actually quite some people do. Whenever I go to vote recently, or go to get groceries or anything, I pretty much just walk. It's a walkable suburb. And what I never really realized much up to this point, I guess, is that part of that might not just lie in the fact that there are barely any cars around. In fact, I'd have to watch out more for cyclists than cars, or the fact that just walking, cycling, taking urban transit is much less relatively sponsored in the Netherlands, or any larger issues, but that part of the issue of making an area walkable is just making it look varied, like having all kinds of different buildings, making it interesting to walk in. I'm sure you've heard of some of the experiments of people that have found that people are willing to walk or drive or cycle a longer route if that route is more interesting, if there are more interesting buildings along the way, things like that. And for me, that was something interesting to get more into the suburbs of the city, of Amar City in particular, and try to make these areas walkable, despite them being much less dense and, there's still being Amar City. by at least varying the amount of different houses that I use and using all kinds of different houses within one street, and especially getting all of that foliage in and the colorful pathways and everything in such a way that the city perhaps doesn't even have to look beautiful from an in-game standpoint, but if it were in real life, it would at least be much more fun to walk through than any kind of simple, well, let's say just American typical suburb with every house being a carbon copy of the one next to it. And that was something that I thought was very interesting. The video in general is very interesting, but it's something that really relates to the way that I'm hoping to make Amar City here. Anyway, just to catch up for a little bit, I also went into some decals over here and decaled and extra detailed quite a bit of the downtown area. Some of these parts were still very empty, and many of them also really lacked some detail to it. So I decided I wanted to get back to that at least a little bit and add some of these new very large decals to add some texture to the asphalt and to the concrete, and also get some extra planters and stuff in. So overall, it should hopefully look a little bit better. I'm not sure how much more I can really do with the decals. They're not really meant for the kind of textures that I'm using on my map, unfortunately, and for some of them, they really clash. Like, I don't really have too much to really make use of it. Also, I didn't want to overuse some of those decals because that might look like everything is very old and kind of dilapidated, when, you know, that can look really beautiful in game, but it's not the kind of look that I'm trying to go for here. But anyway, I thought that could add a slightly more unique touch to the city. But now we're back to suburbs anyway. Now, what I also kind of wanted to talk about on the topic of detailing is this city isn't really focused on detail. It's really just about the ideas behind the city and the making of this fantasy city of mine into a somewhat reality. But recently, there's been some really amazing, astounding detailing on city skylines. There have long been really great detailed projects in city skylines, but just more or less restricted to Simtropolis or the subreddits in pictures. But recently I've also begun following some YouTubers who just popped on the scene and are doing more and more detailed work, and it's so incredible that I kind of just want to give it a shout out. One of them being creativeDEX, who has some really amazing stuff out there. You might know him for Lindblom, which hit the Steam Workshop top, which is really awesome, but he's got so much amazing detailed stuff. And another one being Crumbs McGee, who's really focused recently on making smaller intersections and those smaller projects with an amazing amount of detail, and using all of the new decals and foliage to the fullest, and it looks really amazing. That's some kind of stuff that I would love to get into someday, but I guess I can only wish I could actually make stuff that looks that good. And part of me is also just Amar City has a completely different focus, but it's great stuff in the game nonetheless. And also what I really wanted to mention as well is that there's a new series by... I keep forgetting how to pronounce his name, even though it's always in the video description. Anyway, if I remember correctly, it's spelled IHXAI. Yeah, that's it. Just XI, I guess. Which has a new series in which he's recreating Dubai in a collab with asset creators, and it is already looking really amazing. And when it comes to recreating something to some of the smallest details and creating also just beautiful road layouts, it's already one of my favorite series ever, even though there's only one episode of it. I'm not sure why I'm trying to just give everyone shoutouts in this video, but it's something that I thought was really amazing. And if you're interested in Amar City, you might be interested in that kind of stuff as well. Even though Amar City is trying to go against the Dubai sort of city building in city skylines, I think in the end it can still be something that's super interesting to watch and can be done really beautifully as well. So yeah, that was basically, I guess, my weekly picks when it comes to my favorite stuff in city skylines. Of course, there's always, the good stuff that probably everybody knows at this point, like Strict Toaster and Flux. But I just wanted to talk about this stuff because it's stuff that, keeps me busy as well, and I definitely like to watch other series as well. And if you haven't heard of any of this stuff, because there are some smaller YouTubers who don't get as much attention, and you're still interested to check out some more series, you definitely check it out because it's really amazing stuff. Anyway, that is all I wanted to really say about that. I'm trying to finish up this part of the city at this point, and I think it's also a good time to start talking a little bit about my future plans, even though they're still quite vague. I know I name-dropped the airport earlier on in this episode. I am sort of in the preparation of making an airport. That said, I'm sort of in preparation for all kinds of stuff. I actually spent 2 hours before this episode just trying to mess with the road textures and see if I could get any good ones with Roads United. But none of them had non-colored bus roads, so they all turned the bus roads into black asphalt, and I was not having any of that, so we're just back to normal now. But anyway, I also got into some mods for airports, and finally decided to update my list for airport assets and that jazz as well. So hopefully we should be getting into airports as soon as possible when I actually have a layout and have some tests with the airport and know what I'm going for. And also, there are of course some plans to get into a university, some sporting facilities as well, a hospital of some kind, a large park, although that will be outside of the city. Permaculture is definitely something that I would like to try as well. And of course there is the issue of energy. Not sure if I ever talked about this before, but the plan is just to have fields of solar panels outside the city. That is just my current plan. I may very well change my mind, and I'm open for any suggestions as always, of course. But these are some of the things that I want to head into once I actually have most of the buildings done. And to be quite frank, even if I don't have the entire sort of body part of the city done, I wanted to move into this area right here, because this is where the airport is going to be. And you might notice that very straight section of sand sort of jutting out into the sea. That is the area where I am planning to have the airport at some point in the future. So we'll definitely see that expansion happening at some point very soon along the road as well. For now though, it's just all about finishing the suburban areas. And another final thing that I had to do in this episode, which is coming up in a little bit, is to actually get in the marina, which is again quite simple, and it's quite small as well. I'm still not sure how exactly I'm going to regulate the entry into the sea, because quite obviously I can't just have it enter just like that, so whether I'll have to have a barrier around the entire city or something similar, we'll see at some point in the future. But this is the simple marina for now, with just some boats and a way to bring the entire area to life a little bit more. And with that, I would like to conclude this episode. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry if it was again a little bit more messy. Trying to get back into the real content sometime soon with some of the more exciting stuff and more unique stuff that'll be happening in the city. We're almost done with some of the basic necessary stuff. Just hang on for a little bit more, and I'll see you in some of the future episodes. Bye guys!